hardest skill to learn, but most important to master. It's something that separates the great from the okay and makes an otherwise good DM bad. Bad pacing makes D&D boring. And you only really notice it when it's all messed up. Even if the DM follows all the common advice, say yes, rule of cool, they can still be terrible DMs if they can't master their pacing. And there's a whole lot of information out there about how to pace your campaigns. And I just did a whole video on how to pace your combat. But what there's not a whole lot of attention given to, but there should be, is how to pace your session. How do you actually run the game? This is even more important for home games than it is for open play. In open play, they have time constraints. The DM has to cover so much content in the allotted time. And you can tell new Adventurers League DMs by how much they kind of rush at the end. But if you're not cognizant of pacing, you might trap your friends in an evening of boredom they can't escape from due to the bonds of politeness. And they'll never want to play again. Pacing is weird in tabletop RPGs too, because knowing the rules of storytelling isn't enough. You can still be an expert novelist and have your pacing all messed up, because unless you're talking about how a campaign unfolds across several sessions, and that's going to be the next video, the pacing you really notice is how the story flows across the table and the resulting engagement from the players. And this is fast becoming my style, but I think a whole lot of the advice out there focuses on the wrong stuff. If you write a post asking for advice, asking, how do I get my players better engaged? You'll get responses like, tell them to turn off their phones. No, your players looking at their phones is a symptom of their disengagement, not the cause. So, in this video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna break down some very broad, high-level ideas about how to keep an engaging and exciting pace at each session. We're gonna talk about the root causes of disengagement. This isn't gonna be if you do X, Y, and Z, your game will be better. Rather, we're gonna talk about these high-level, broad concepts, and if you learn and internalize them, you can better maintain that exciting and engaging pace at your game. Best advice first. The most important thing you can do to maintain a good pace at your game is to abstract to the nearest interesting decision point. Now, you already know that if you describe every action the characters do in exhausting detail, your game is going to grind to a halt. That's why you never describe how someone buttons up their blouse or straps their boots on. You handle stuff at a higher level to avoid bogging everything down. By the same token, you can't just abstract the entire game. You can't just say, all right, if everyone rolls above a 10, you defeat the bad guy and everyone has fun. So the question isn't whether or not to abstract elements of the fiction for expediency, but to what degree we should abstract. And to answer that question, we're gonna look to the golden rule. You should abstract up until doing any more would take away the player's agency. You abstract the nearest meaningful decision. And meaningful decisions are interesting ones. They're ones that have consequences. For example, the decision point shouldn't be, do I check under the mattress for a key? Because then there's also decisions, do I look in the vase? Do I check behind every tapestry? Do I tap every chest for a false bottom? Rather, the meaningful decision should be, after I've investigated, do I risk meddling with the alarm? There are a lot of areas where you can liven up the pace of your game by abstracting until you reach a pivotal point. You're gonna shift that narrative detail up until the players reach a point where they can meaningfully affect the fiction. It's not, how do you get back to town? But instead, do we take the road and risk detection or cross through the haunted canyon and face monsters? It's not, how much can we get for this magic sword? But rather, do we take this lowball offer from the fence or draw attention to ourselves by seeking other buyers? A lot of DMs have this fear about abstracting because they think once they go from this high-level montage summary and zero in on a detail, the PCs will know something is up. They'll get on edge and start investigating everything. There has to be something because the DM stopped and described the detail. And now the DM is sad. His surprise is ruined by the player's metagaming. So to mitigate this, he throws in lots of details as red herrings to try to distract the players. But this is completely counterproductive to maintain a fast and engaging and interesting pace. Yes, you want the PCs to pick up on the details. That's why you slow down to describe them. You put those details there so the PCs can learn something, so they can make an informed decision. And that agency, that ability to make a choice is what keeps the game interesting and engaging, not your gotcha traps. Of course, the chalice with the skull-shaped diamonds on the black skull altar is trapped. The question is, how do you get it out? And because not every decision is really pivotal, you're gonna have to tell the players that you're abstracting, and they're gonna have to trust that you're acting fairly. It helps if you're giving the players the benefit of the doubt. Of course, they're trying to move stealthily through the dungeon. Of course, they're trying to barter with the merchant. Passive scores exist for a reason. It also means that you as a DM, you have to point out their successes. They found the hidden door by feeling through the dust on the walls. And it also means describing the reasons for their failures. You guys were moving pretty fast through this dark dungeon and you failed to notice the poison needle. Fortunately, your players will let you know when you've lost the pace. They won't tell you, but they'll let you know in other ways. Why are they stacking dice? Why are they looking at their phones? Because they're not engaged. Because they don't need to be engaged with that scene. Boredom is a comfort your players should not have. Boredom means they can afford to not be paying attention. Why? Because they're not confronted with any danger. Now, this doesn't just mean danger of character death, but also danger of story failure, of not being able to meet a narrative objective. When your players can afford to be bored, afford to be not engaged, it means they're not facing any real opposition. So engagement is dependent on challenge, and challenge is dependent on expertise. So this is your task as a DM. You need to make the challenges that the players face be equal to their expertise. Why do your roleplay scenes fall flat? Because the players know all the tropes and the cliches that can overcome them. You ever wonder why the CR system seems to break down? Because it's neutral to player skill. They should be utilizing their competencies to the fullest extent without getting overwhelmed. If the challenge is greater than their expertise, they won't be making any progress and they'll get frustrated. If your skill outstrips the obstacle, you'll get bored. Or if the progress that you're making is too slow compared to the task at hand, you'll get indifferent. But when the challenge, the obstacles, the conflict, the danger require all of your skill and expertise to overcome, you are focused and engaged in what you're doing. But here's the thing, you can't have nonstop opposition. You can't hold that tension forever. If you try to hold your players' feet to the fire for 4 straight hours, they'll get burnt out. They'll get tired and frustrated and disinterested as a result. They need a break. They need that release of tension. So, as a DM, you need to learn to keep a rhythm to your sessions of when to keep the action moving quickly and when to let it slow. The good news is if you're paying attention and know what to look for, the players will be telling you when they need a slowly paced scene. Have you ever noticed that sometimes they'll try to inject a roleplay scene where you didn't intend one? Why do they pay so much attention to inconsequential elements? Why do they want to go and seek out a tavern? Consciously or not, your players are trying to tell you that they need relief, and they're trying to create a slowly paced scene so they can recuperate. But a slow scene isn't a break from the game. It's still part of the story. And so as a general rule, as a fastly paced scene has to contain urgency or growing tension, a slowly paced scene should release tension or reveal new information. Even if there's no immediate opposition, every scene should still allow the players the opportunity to decide something meaningful. Therefore, when we do our scene setting, that little bit of narration that describes a situation, we should help the players understand what options they have to act on. Imparting that information is what stops a slow scene from becoming a dead scene. It creates the right frame of mind for the players and prompts them to keep the action moving forward. As you walk into the dusty goblet, the barkeep looks talkative, and there's a menacing looking man shooting dice in the corner. The door opens to reveal an empty room. The door looks like it could be barred from the inside. The main hallway continues down and stretches beyond your vision. Stretched out by the campfire with your companions, thoughts begin to swirl in your head. Why did Thea break her promise? Where are Effie's parents? What's the meaning of Wood Circle? It's important to notice how in each of those examples, I didn't give do this or that options. That's how you get players to feel railroaded. Instead, I pointed out some possibilities and then left it up to them whether or not they want to take the initiative and act on it. Dungeon Masters have the unique challenge of trying to entertain a small group of people all at the same time. It's commonly accepted advice to give each player a moment to shine in each session. Players want to feel special, to have their moment in the spotlight. And this is part of the genius of a class-based game, where people have specialties. There's ample opportunity for that. But right here we have a dilemma. Players need individual attention, but at the same time, you need to keep everybody entertained. Unfortunately, some players check out when you're trying to give another player their spotlight time. And is that okay? Well, I'd say it's good etiquette to pay attention to other people's special moments. But as a DM, you can't force another player to pay attention, but you can encourage it. A trick I came up with to re-engage a distracted player during another player's spotlight time is all you have to do is mention their character when describing the scene during that other player's moment. The mere mention of the distracted player's character, even if it's not their scene, is usually enough to pique their interest and draw them back into the moment. Curious, the barkeep leans in closer. You shoot a glance at Clarence in the corner, and then he asks you to continue your story. As you feel your way through the intricacies of the dwarven lock, sweat dripping down your brow, you hear the impatient tapping of Pollard's foot. You shoot him a dirty look, and then he stops, leaving you free to focus on the task at hand. You don't even have to literally pull their character into the scene. Usually just the mention of their character's name is enough. As your dream continues, you see a woman off in the distance. As you get closer, you can see her hair and it reminds you of Acey's. See how that works? The good news is that as DM, pacing is completely under your control. And as DM, it's your responsibility to recognize that pacing is more important than your story. It's more important than your plans. Therefore, to paraphrase the book of Matthew, if an encounter is causing your pacing to falter, cast it out. It's better for that to be thrown away than for your entire session to become bogged down. Have the enemies flee. Have the NPC abruptly end the conversation, or have their next suggestion solve the puzzle. You have the power and control, and you need to exercise it to keep your game interesting. And more than just interesting, keep it fun. The player should never feel like they failed because your pacing is all messed up. None of the fleeing gnolls are going to warn the others or hide crucial information. The NPC they're talking to acquiesces and acts in their interest to some degree. And that trap is not going to go off and kill them. So now that we're aware that we're in control of pacing and aware of good engagement, how do we know when to use it? Well, good DMs are writers, and writers are observers of human behavior. It is imperative that you are cognizant of the mood at your table and the engagement of individual players. If you're going to be a dungeon master, if you're going to essentially lead a group, then you must develop the basic social skills to read people, read your players for clues of their engagement. Are they leaning in? Are they talking to each other? Are they really hanging on to your words? Or are they leaning back, stacking dice, and looking at their phones? This is another reason why I think having the ability to improvise and knowing the rules is so important, why I'm so keen on leaving the books closed. Because every time you have to look at your notes, or every time you have your nose buried in a book, you're not watching your players. You have no way to observe their level of interest. So either make a ruling and move on, or make something up and get back to checking your players for their level of engagement. Because that's what's going to give you the strongest pace for your game. Yeah, that's it. That is the video, folks. This was another pretty good one, I thought. There is a whole lot of other tips that I didn't really include in here, and I'm sure that you guys have thoughts on those. Yeah, now that I have a whole bunch of subscribers, wow, thanks everybody. I'm gonna plan a pretty big project. So follow me on Twitter if you wanna get some details on that. I'm probably gonna be announcing it maybe by the end of July. And there's probably a whole lot of stuff that I didn't cover, and you have some thoughts you wanna share. I try to reply to almost everything, so let me know in the comments below. My favorite part of the official DM screen is the Something Happens table. It's such a great tool to keep things moving forward.